We'll start off by talking about Mexican Americans in urban areas. Remember last time we were talking a little bit about how more and more Mexican Americans were migrating to the cities. Part of the reason for this migration was the mechanization of agriculture. So you're getting more and more machines taking the place of human workers in the agricultural industry. You also have issues that we talked about, such as the Bracero program. These are contract labor workers being brought from Mexico to work on the farms. They're taking the place of Mexican American workers, and so that's why you see them moving from the rural areas to the cities. You also have a large influx of undocumented workers as well who are taking jobs in the farming industry, and so this is all working together to have more and more Mexican Americans moving to urban areas. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with Mexican Americans in Los Angeles during this time. And so in Los Angeles, we talked a little bit before about how there was segregation going on. Talked about Sonora Town. And so that was continuing. You have Mexican Americans living in neighborhoods that are pretty run down, and they're still paying high rents. Some of these neighborhoods will be displaced, meaning Mexican Americans will be kicked out of their neighborhoods because of construction projects. The Chavez Ravine neighborhood is one example of this, where Mexican Americans are kicked out of their neighborhoods, in this case to build Dodger Stadium near downtown. Here's a picture of what Dodger Stadium looked like in the early stages of construction. You also have segregation in schools for Mexican Americans in Los Angeles and other urban areas at this time. Mexican Americans are being pushed into vocational training programs rather than receiving a regular, more broad-based education at this time. And so this is limiting their prospects so that when they get out of school, they are forced to enter into more menial labor or manual labor instead of moving up and getting higher positions and better jobs. But Mexican Americans will continue to try to get better employment. You're going to see efforts to try to get rid of job discrimination. An example of this will be Bill S-101. In 1945, Senator Dennis Chavez, you see him over here, we talked about him before, out of New Mexico, was trying to get this bill passed. The bill would establish a permanent Fair Employment Practices Commission. We talked about the FEPC before, but when we were talking about it during World War II, the FEPC was mainly geared towards getting rid of job discrimination in the defense industries, right? Because it's related to the war effort. But here, Chavez is pushing to have an FEPC created for the entire economy. Right, so for all jobs, not just the defense industry, and so this got a lot of pushback. There's a lot of opposition to the permanent FEPC being put in place. Okay, because this would put more pressure on employers to hire minorities, right? So that's the point of creating this commission. You remember we talked about it last time, where the commission basically put pressure on employers. They had to show that they were hiring at least some minority workers, Mexican Americans, African Americans, and so you have a lot of pushback coming from racists basically who don't want to hire minority groups. They don't want to see a permanent FEPC for all industries, and so some of the pushback that you're getting is coming from Southern Democrats or Dixiecrats. These are individuals who felt that there should not be an FEPC because that was infringing on state rights. Okay, so they don't want the federal government to tell states and employers what they should do or how they should hire their employees. So for them, it's a states' rights issue. Okay, but of course there's racial underpinnings to that as well. There's also the issue of anti-communism going on at this time. The belief was that workers who were involved in labor unions and involved in strikes were often connected to communism, and so you see a huge backlash against communist organizations and labor unions because they get this bad reputation. Another thing that hampered trade unions was the passage of the Taft-Hartley Act. What did this do? Well, the Taft-Hartley Act basically made it to where employers could hire individuals who were not a part of trade unions. See, what would happen was trade unions would sign agreements with employers saying that only members of the trade union could be hired for that job. Okay, but with the passage of the Taft-Hartley Act, employers could hire people who were not a part of the trade unions, right? And that hurt trade unions because now they don't have a unified membership, right? So if the union decides to strike, and you have people who are not part of the union working for that company, they could continue working, and that would hurt the strike. Right. The Taft-Hartley Act also made it to where unions had to give 60-day notice if they were going to go on strike, and this would allow employers to prepare for that strike. Okay, and so you see trade unions taking a hit during this time, as well as opposition to the FEPC.